biggest killer disease. And for us here in Nigeria, the statistics are mind-boggling. Over 90% of the population is said to be at great risk.
Absolutely, Claire. Nigeria bears a larger share of the burden for malaria than most of the rest of the world. And as you very well know, the startling data you just referred to are contained in the Nigeria National Malaria Strategic Plan for 2014 to 2029. Now, it reveals that malaria is responsible for 60% of outpatient visits to health facilities, and 30% of childhood deaths, and 25% of fatalities in children under 1 year, and 11% of maternal deaths.
Indeed, it may also interest you to know that 70% of pregnant women suffer from malaria. But beyond the health factor, malaria burden also impacts, on the gross domestic product of countries with high risk, like, of course, Nigeria. Now, in malaria treatment and prevention costs, as well as manpower loss, Nigeria loses an estimated sum of 300 billion naira annually. Now, conversely, a reduction in malaria burden is said to be associated with increase in GDP growth. Now, this, entire Kingsley, of course, is despite gains made in the rollback malaria efforts, over the years.
That's right. I mean, the attempts have been made, or efforts have been on to ensure that the malaria burden in the country, is significantly reduced. But there have been comments, of course, on the occasion of this year's World Malaria Day by interested persons who indicate that Nigeria, of course, still has a lot to do with regard to reducing the malaria burden in the country.
Indeed, Nigeria, of course, despite all this, faces a big new challenge, and that's, of course, the decimation of health infrastructure across the country's northeast at the height of the Boko Haram's insurgency, and it has put millions of Nigerians at a high risk of malaria infection and malaria-related deaths. Now, the majority of the estimated 2 million internally displaced persons in the area, including vulnerable children under the age of 5, as well as pregnant women, no longer have easy access to the free test and artemisinin combination therapy drugs that were previously available at government-funded healthcare centers.
Now, medical professionals are also concerned about the possibility of increased resistance to anti-malaria drugs, as mosquitoes are said to adapt increasingly to warmer temperatures across sub-Saharan Africa.
Indeed, the 2017 World Malaria Day, celebrated yesterday, is giving us another opportunity to seek answers as to how we can rid the world of malaria, and how do we prevent, control, and eventually, hopefully, eliminate malaria parasite in our environment. And Kingsley, you do know that USA did so way back in the 1940s.
Oh, well, yes. I mean, a number of other countries have also rolled back malaria significantly. There are environmental issues that are concerned, appropriate investment and deployment of, the tools that are required to ensure that the breeding grounds of malaria parasites are, reduced significantly or otherwise eliminated. So these are the issues that guests will be discussing on the program. What do we need to do? What is it that we are getting right? Indeed, the stats are coming down with regard to the fatalities arising from malaria. I know that was the malaria burden in the country is declining, but how can we accelerate the pace of the decline of the burden?
But that's with the children under 5.
Absolutely,
as well as a lot of maternal.
And we all know, by the way, that if you live in this country, at one point or the other, you would have come down with malaria. And you know how it feels.
The estimated 7 out of 10 persons.
Well, it could be more. It could be more. But some persons, depending on your genotype, it was also said that such persons are more susceptible to malaria. But as you indicated, Claire, malaria, of course, impacts the country's gross domestic product, because if you take ill, you can't be at work, and if you're not at work, you can't contribute to.
And you can also go to school.
Absolutely.
And if you don't go to school, of course, you and I know what that will, of course, the impact of that. But this is Good Morning Nigeria, as always, and it's happening live here on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. I am Claire Adelabu Abdul Razak. I thank all of you for joining us as usual.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Clay welcoming you to Africa's largest television network. We are here in the Abuja headquarters studios. Of course, in the course of the program, we have our regular supplementary segments, including newspaper review, business, sports, and others. In the meantime, we're going over to the newsroom, and here is our guide, Lydia Bassi. Hi, Lydia.
Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to the news. The sum of 467.807 billion naira has been shared as federal allocation for the month of March 2017 for federal, state, and local government councils. The Accountant General of the Federation, Ahmed Idris, disclosed this at the end of the technical subcommittee meeting of the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee, FAC.
For the month of March is 299.93 billion naira. There is also gross VAT of 78.651 billion naira. There is an exchange gain of 66.967 billion naira.
I know the federal government is doing all that it could to ensure that peace is achieved and sustained in the oil producing states, so that the more we have the crude sold, the more the revenue that will be generated by the country and shared across the states for ongoing development to our people in our respective states.
Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has renewed the call for international collaboration aimed at tackling the menace of terrorism, while emphasizing the commitment of Nigeria to cooperate in the global fight. State House correspondent Jide Onifade reports that the Vice President made the call when he received the Bangladesh Chief of Army Staff, General Abu Mohammed.
I understand through my visit this relationship will be strengthened further, and we have discussed to increase the scope of cooperation in other fields also, and I hope in the coming years, days and years, we'll see further cooperation in other fields.
Leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, has been granted bail in the sum of 300 million naira each, with 300 million naira with three sureties who are to produce 100 million naira each. Ali Utoko reports that the three sureties must include a 7th senator, a Jewish religious leader, and a highly respected personality with landed property in the Federal Capital Territory.
We are going to resist every attempt by the federal government to flout this order made by the court this morning. Even if we tell mobilizing people to the street, I will do that. And any attempt to flout this order will bring an end to this trial.
In the meantime, the ECOWAS Court of Justice has adjourned the judgment of the case between Dorothy Njemanze and 3 others versus the government of Nigeria. Okokpenyang reports that the plaintiff is demanding 100 million naira as compensation for alleged damages to their reputation. Moving on now, the presidency has reacted to a statement credited by a former military governor of Kaduna State, Colonel Abubakar Dangiwa Umar, retired, in which he accused the government of President Muhammadu Buhari of being unfair in the war against corruption. A statement by the senior specialist to the president on media and publicity, Malam Garba Shehu, says, by now, President Buhari's administration is quite familiar with the barrage of verbal attacks that have accompanied the administration's determined war against corruption. A number of Nigeria's elites, uncomfortable with the disruption of business as usual, have fought viciously, usually via the media. Shehu says the comments coming from Colonel Umar is highly disappointing because he is not in a position to label accusations. Curiously, despite the various accusations and media attacks, no one has so far come forth with any evidence of President Buhari's selectiveness in the war against corruption. All the agencies involved are allowed freedom to carry out their responsibilities without any interference whatsoever from the presidency. Ultimately, the final frontier of the war against corruption is the judiciary. After the anti-graft agencies have gathered proof of corruption and made arrests, they present the accused before competent courts of the land who have the final say on who is guilty of corruption and who is not. Garba Shehu again reiterated that President Buhari has never interfered with the judicial process, despite publicly expressing his frustration with how slowly corruption cases are handled. The war against corruption, he says, is here to stay as long as President Buhari is in power, as the administration will not succumb to media attacks nor be deterred by false accusations by disgruntled elements. The Senate adjourned plenary after returning from 2 weeks recess in memory of a departed colleague, Senator Isiaka Adeleke. Moving the motion for the adjournment at Tuesday's plenary, Senate Majority Leader Ahmed Lawan extolled the virtues of the late senator.
Heavy heart to announce the death of one of our colleagues, very distinguished Senator Isiaka Adetunji Adeleke, the Chairman Senate Committee on Capital Market.
After adjournment, Senate President Bukola Saraki led principal officers and others to sign a condolence register. Some of the lawmakers spoke to National Assembly correspondent.
Very pleasant chap, and his contributions to our debate was a statesman, and he was level-headed and was a true Nigerian.
He's a patriot, he's a nationalist. He's somebody who we can describe as a grassroots politician. He's very close to his people.
He was a gentleman. As a senator, he was truly distinguished. As a governor, he was excellent and he excelled. And as a family man, he led well.
Plenary resumes today. The House of Representatives has paid tribute to late Senator Isiaka Adeleke, describing his death as a huge loss to Osun State, the National Assembly, and Nigeria in general. The legislators who reconvened after a 2-week Easter break stepped down all items on the order paper in honor of the late senator from Osun State. The Kano Command of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency has intercepted more than 850 kilograms of drugs worth several billions of naira. Fatima Sanusi Karaye reports that the fake pilot vehicle being used by the criminals was used to convey illicit drugs from Edo State to Yobe State. However, they ran out of luck when officials of the National Drug Enforcement Agency on routine patrol within Kano Metropolis suspected something unusual with their appearance.
Informant, it was a security vehicle. And they're scared to accost it because they don't want something to happen, because they have seen them with a sort of police uniform. My PSO was alerted. He moved his men there immediately. And when they accosted them, yes, they tried to defend themselves as police officers. They said, okay, let's see your identity. By the time they brought them down, as usual, they discovered, number one, they're only wearing the cap. Down is empty. They discovered that there are only two in the car. At the back is filled up with something. If you look at the cabin, it's unlike. No security vehicle will move like that and they will cover the cabin unless something serious.
I'm from Kogi State. I started this last year. This is my third time now.
I'm from Delta State. The first time I've been in Kano.
And finally, the Nigerian Television Authority has been commended for setting the pace for television broadcasting and promoting journalism profession in the country, when a delegation from Daily Stream newspaper visited the Director General of the NTA in Abuja. The challenge of maintaining professionalism, objectivity, and patriotism were highlighted.
Unfortunately, like most professions in Nigeria, journalism is also faced with the tragedy of a decline in terms of productivity on the part of journalists. So we believe if organizations key into capacity building, for practicing journalists, I think it will go a long way in reviving, the profession.
You are operating in a very difficult environment, but with the vast experience that you collectively have, I hope you thrive.
And that is the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Claire and Kingsley after this break. Good morning.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt. But remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture. Cadbury Bournvita now comes in an attractive new 500-gram refill pack. Simply open and reseal after use to retain the chocolatey and creamy taste. Cadbury Bournvita. Prepare to win.
All right, we're rolling on to the business sector now. That's where the business news, of course, will be taken. And CBN's former governor, Charles Soludo, has recommended the scrapping of multiple exchange rates, and he says that's a step to recovering the economy. Details of this and more, Joy Uzo.
Welcome to Business News. Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP, of the federal government, which targets a gross domestic product GDP growth rate of 7% by 2020, is on course. Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, said this while presenting a paper at the Annan Day in Abuja. The minister said government is committed to the 4-year plan, which unveils a roadmap for Nigeria's economic recovery, growth, and sustainable development. The minister, who is also a member of Association of National Accountants of Nigeria, ANAN, said accountants are a part of governance architectures that tackle corruption and is also supposed to help combat both the opportunity and the cost of fraud and corruption. To this effect, she said accountants in Nigeria must be prepared to collaborate with the federal government to realize its 4-year economic recovery plan.
The GDP growth we have planned for 2017 is 2.5%. This is against a projected nominal growth of 107.93 trillion naira for the whole of the Federation.
Chairman, Association of National Accountants of Nigeria, FCT, Abdullah Yahya, said ANAN FCT will support the federal government economic drive by ensuring transparency and accountability to facilitate overcoming the recession.
If not for corruption, the bad road we see, people go to hospital, there are no drugs. You go to offices, there are no materials to work with. The monies, where are they? It has gone somewhere. There is need for recovery. This government is doing very well to put back into shape what has been lost in the previous years. ANA has been mentoring his members, training professionally to see that all leakages where money goes out are being blocked and the wealth being put back into the economy.
Economic experts at the event acknowledged the federal government economic recovery drive and the whistleblower policy, both of which will play a critical role in the fight against corruption. They expressed optimism that the 2020 projection of the economic recovery and growth plan will be realized. A former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Professor Chukwuma Soludo, has highlighted needed steps he feels the federal government should adopt to bring the country out of the biting economic challenges and get back on the path of growth. Soludo said policymakers must get the country out of the current multiple exchange rates regime and reduce the widespread between the official and parallel market exchange rates of the Naira to a maximum of 3 to 5%. The currency currently has about 5 exchange rates, according to analysts. The former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, who was the chairman of the economic discourse organized by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, spoke in Lagos while fielding questions from journalists shortly after the event. He pointed out that policymakers are expected to be taking bold steps that would navigate the country away from crude oil dependency to a non-oil economy in the long run. The Naira reversed some of the gains it recorded last week, closing at 390 Naira against the United States dollar on the parallel market on Monday. The local currency had closed at 380 Naira per dollar on Friday. The naira has been hovering between 380 naira to $1 and 410 naira to $1 in the past 2 weeks, as the Central Bank of Nigeria continues to intervene in the foreign exchange market to stabilize the exchange rate. The interventions are aimed at narrowing the spread between the official and black market rates of the naira against the dollar. According to analysts, the CBN has sold around $4 billion since intervention began in February. Now a quick check at closing figures on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Business news, the Lagos State government has disclosed that it generated 436.3 billion naira internal revenue in 2016, as against 399.4 billion naira the state generated in 2015. Lagos Commissioner for Finance, Mr. Akinyemi Ashade, at a ministerial briefing to mark the second year in office of Governor Akinwumi Ambode, also said that the state realized 7 billion naira from land use charge, as against 6 billion naira realized in 2015. He explained that the increase in revenue was as a result of new innovations and continued public sensitizations of residents of the state. That does it on Business News. Thanks for watching.
Many thanks to you, Joy Uzo. Coming up next is the newspaper review.
It's time now for us to welcome Bayo Atoyebi to our studios for today's edition of Review of the Papers. Hi, Bayo. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kingsley. Good morning. Good morning, Claire. Morning. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Claire, kick off with the titles you have.
Quickly kick off with the Authority. And the Authority newspaper has at its lead story, Court grants Nnamdi Kanu bail. With the rider, parents reject stringent bail conditions. 44 IPOB members freed, and Governor Fawashe denounces oppression of Igbos. And the picture story, you can see leader of the indigenous peoples of Biafra, IPOB, Nnamdi Kanu, accompanied by his supporters shortly after he was granted bail at the Federal High Court in Abuja. And just immediately after that, ex-Governor Babangida Aliyu remanded in prison. It's also trending, and other trending stories at the atop of the nameplate.
All right, let's take a look at the front page of the Nigerian Pilot. Nigerian Pilot, immediately below the nameplate says, Oshibajo panel Grace Babache Lawal. Details of that story can be found on page 4. Of course, Lawal is the suspended Secretary to the Government of the Federation. Ministerial nomination, Kogi APC wants nominee Ocheni replaced. That's on page 5 in greater detail. And the story Claire read a moment ago from the Authority is the lead for the Nigerian Pilot. It comes with a kicker, alleged corruption. Ex-Governor Babangida Aliyu docked. Aliyu was governor of Niger State. Details of that story can be found on page 6. And then below the composite photographs you have there on the front page, you have this other headline. It says, confusion and condemnation as court grants Kanu 100 million naira bail. That's on page 6. And below that, Kogi governor spends 41 billion naira on salaries. And 43 victims of human trafficking rescued in Kano and Katsina. On page 5, Lagos redeems 57.5 billion naira from bondholders. And Transcorp Board appoints new CEO. And on page 5 as well, Adeleke, Senate holds validity session today. Bayo?
Yes. Two court cases have dominated the newspapers. First is the case by the Federal High Court, Abuja, where granted bail to Nnamdi Kanu, the self-proclaimed leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, who is standing trial for treasonable felony. The judge had declared that the defendant needs better health attention that the prison services cannot provide. I hereby use my discretion and grant the bail on certain conditions, and the conditions are not far-fetched. He is to produce 3 sureties, and 3 persons. One must be a Jewish leader, the other a senator of Igbo extraction, and the 3rd person a highly respected individual, a resident and property owner in Abuja. Aside from that, the 3 sureties will deposit 100 million naira each. While on bail, he is not to attend any rally nor grant interviews. He is also to make himself available for trial whenever required. He is to deposit his 2 international passports with the registrar of the court. There have been reactions about the bail condition. It's been described as giving the bail by left hand and taking it away by the right hand. And the bail conditions are very stringent. Reasons are not far-fetched. Treasonable felony are normally not bailable. In fact, 3 other accomplices were denied bail. The judge says it is to ensure that he attends to his health and at the same time make himself available for trial when required. The other court case relates to self-proclaimed or renowned governor who was known as servant governor. Former Governor Muazu Babangida Aliyu and his ex-wife chief of staff, Umoru Nasco, have been remanded in prison in Mina. The 2 are standing trial for a 6-count charge of criminal breach of trust and abuse of office profiled against them by the Economic and Financial Crime Commission. Among the accusations are the disposition of 800 million naira ecological fund and another 432 million naira that cannot be accounted for. Both have denied the charges. They are to remain in prison custody for 10 days pending the time that the bail conditions will be. They have been given assurance, however, that when the trial begins on June 12th, it will have ended by June 16th. So that is rapid hearing.
All right, well, and Claire, I was just wondering, the requirement for a Jewish religious leader as one of the conditions for granting bail to Nnamdi Kanu. That's also been reported in some of the media, that we've seen. Together, of course, with the curious perspective coming in that it should not be found in a certain kind of gathering. That reminds one of what used to happen during the apartheid years. If you were a banned person, you couldn't be found in with certain number of persons at any given point in time. But the one asking for a Jewish religious leader is a point of curiosity.
Yes, it's very curious, but it's not also may not be far-fetched. If you have observed, in the last appearances he had had in court, he has always been adorned by the skull cap, which is a symbol of the Jewish religion, which probably demonstrates that he believes in that religion, and that is why they are demanding for a religious leader of his faith to come and stand surety for him. But be that as it may, the implication of a treasonable charge, which normally is not bailable, but the judge used his discretion based on the health condition, and that's why the judge Plessive had to set these conditions.
Well, I hope someday we will not have somebody, who says that he worships at Okija Shrine. You will need. All right, Claire, let's continue with the.
Okay, and let's take this day newspaper and a very catchy headline it has. It reads, Jonathan, Obama made it clear he wanted a change of government in Nigeria. And of course, you can see that the writer says U.S. naval ships sailed to Gulf of Guinea days before 2015 elections. Now, of course, accuses ex-PDP chairman, other allies of betrayal. Muazu denies, of course, any allegation. Or another story trending right there beside the picture story. Oshibajo panel interrogates suspended SJF Lawal. We've also talked about that. It's trending in other parts of the paper. Babangida Aliyu and Natsuko remanded in prison, and you see, of course, the picture story celebrating 100 years of SOAS University of London. That's the outlook of this day newspaper.
All right, let's also take a look at the front page of the Punch newspaper. Punch is next for us. The Punch, of course, is dealing with the economy and how the country, of course, is likely to be out of recession. Let's take a look now at the front page of the Punch. It says, Emefiele is CBN governor. That's the kicker. Nigeria will be out of recession by third quarter. And you have a quote there that's accepted. It says, as I speak to you, Our external reserves stand above, you have the figure there, sorry, that's a bit fuzzy to me, I can't immediately see that.
But
of course, the details, of course, you can find from the paper. So Nigeria will be out of recession by the third quarter. And then below that, of course, Ohaneze kicks as Kanu gets bail on health grounds. And then you have other headlines at the foot of the front page, one of which is that we'll develop Borno within 6 months, says Shetima. And Libya deposits 253 Nigerians. Then the returnees get food and transport fares. Another headline, of course, is also there. It deals with the countryman of Aliu. That's the former governor of Niger State.
Indeed, just before Bayo, you take on, there's also the report on the Daily Trust, the only report, of course, we haven't taken today. Federal government states LGs share 467 billion naira for the month of March. Federal government, states and local governments share 467 billion naira for the month of March.
Yes, the central bank governor is very optimistic that by the end of the second quarter, or latest by the third quarter, that is September, Nigeria will be out of the economic recession. He was briefing the Senate President and the Senate Chairman Committee on Banking, and he said that from all indications and with the intervention by the federal government, the economy is on the reviving side. He says effort by the federal government has helped to revive the economy, and intervention by the central bank has also yielded results and will continue with those interventions. He said there is a downward trend in the prices, and indications are that rate of inflation is going down. As at the time he was briefing, he said exchange rate has dropped from 525 naira to a dollar to 370, and the external reserve stands about 31 billion plus, and that is good, according to him, to defend the naira. He says Nigeria will be out of the woods of recession by the end of the second quarter or latest third quarter, September. Now, Borno State Governor Kasim Shetima says the devastation that Borno State suffered will be reversed in the next 6 months. He says the state government is determined to carry out graduated and careful development initiatives that will restore the state. He said the spate of suicide bombing that is ongoing is an indication that the suiciders and the terrorists have been decimated. He said his administration will invest in girl child education and also job creation for the youth to ensure that the restoration of the state is speeded up. He was speaking at the Ahmadu Bello Memorial Foundation at Kaduna. Talking about late Senator Adituji Adeleke, the Senate will be in a validatory session today, but one of his sons is curious, and he said that his father probably who was murdered, and according to him, he claimed that how can a man who was hale and hearty and held meeting with people and was awake up till 2 a.m. all of a sudden by morning without any sickness was found dead. However, he said his personal doctor was invited and called to treat him for complaints about pains in the leg. Later on, he complained about stomach ache. The son is saying that the governor was expected to contest the 2018 election, and his chances of winning was very high, and that was why he was eliminated.
All right, Bayo, well, I would like to thank you. I know there are all kinds of speculations. Perhaps the autopsy report will indicate what the causes of death the cause of death of the late Senator Adeleke. You know, that's the much we can take, but if you are interested, go to page 7 of the Nigerian Pilot. Women threaten to begin recall process on Dino Melaye. That's Senator Dino Melaye. Details of the story coming found on page 7.
Fallout of conversation yesterday,
yeah, we had a conversation yesterday on recall process. The women addressed the press conference in Lokoja yesterday. Bayo Atoyebi, thank you for being with us today. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you as always.
All right. It's Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with malaria, control and elimination in Nigeria.
Hear the call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Go to so let it change.
Introducing the new 5 Alive Pulpy Orange.
Where is the pulp? The pulp. Where is the pulp? Where is the pulp?
Taste the goodness of real orange pulp in every gulp.
Where is the pulp?
The new 5 Alive Pulpy Orange, now in your neighborhood.
We appreciate the gesture, we appreciate her love, and we know that she cares about the people of Nigeria.
She wants to touch people's life, especially the less privileged, or even people who are sick in the hospital. We remember that they have a wife of the president who is very concerned about human life and humanity in general.
All right, let's get on with our conversation. It's a conversation that we're all familiar with. Malaria is a preventable and treatable mosquito-borne disease. Now, what it does is to transmit to man, of course, by the Anopheles mosquito species, which carries the Plasmodium falciparum. It injects into the bloodstream of its host. Unfortunately, many of its hosts or victims have died as a result of this disease. In this report, Ngozi Chude takes a look at the journey so far in the prevention of the disease.
Malaria, a serious health issue that affects millions of people globally, especially young children under the age of 5, pregnant women, patients with other health conditions like HIV/AIDS, and travelers with no prior exposure to malaria. A deadly mosquito-borne disease common in tropical and subtropical countries and territories, malaria as of 2015 records an approximate 240 million cases annually and 3.2 billion people at risk of infection. In Nigeria, malaria has claimed more lives than other diseases put together, a fact that can be trailed to Nigeria's Malaria Indicator Survey, which reveals that 97% of the nation's population live in areas with high malaria risk. Though with different successive governments at all levels taking steps to address the challenge, malaria still accounts for more than 80 million illnesses and about 300,000 deaths annually. As a critical target of the Millennium Development Goals in 2005, the World Health Assembly established a goal of reducing malaria cases and deaths by 75% between 2005 and 2015. Hence, over the past decade, there has been renewed interest in research and innovations in diagnostic methods, drugs and vaccines, and the development of control measures to eradicate malaria. Saddled with the responsibility of coordinating malaria prevention activities and programs, the National Malaria Control Program since 2008 has adopted a specific plan, the goal of which is to reduce 50% of the malaria burden by 2013 by achieving at least 80% coverage of long-lasting impregnated mosquito nets, together with other measures such as 20% of houses in targeted areas receiving indoor residual spraying and treatment with 2 doses of intermittent preventative therapy for 100% of pregnant women who visit antenatal care clinics. Achieving a malaria-free Nigeria and the goal of reducing malaria burden to zero is currently captured in the National Malaria Strategic Plan of 2014 to 2020, which outlines the provision for prevention and treatment services at all levels. Millions of mosquito nets have been distributed to many states in the country, and in 2017 alone, 13 million were distributed in 6 states of the Federation as part of its vector management intervention. With these efforts, Nigeria faces a promising future with regard to malaria control and the reduction. But the call to freedom still remains largely in the hands of all, as revealed by key players at this year's 2017 World Malaria Day. But this year's global theme has closed the gap and end malaria now. Observers say it is crucial to promote rapid diagnostic tests, personal protection measures, use of long-lasting insecticide nets, and encourage antenatal for early detection.
All right, thank you very much there, Ngozi Chude, for that background report. Now, joining us here in the Abuja studios to discuss malaria control and elimination in Nigeria is Dr. Audu Bala Mohammed. He is the National Coordinator of the Nigerian National Malaria Elimination Program. Dr. Bala Mohammed, our pleasure that you are with us on the program this morning.
Good morning, Nigeria.
And we go over to our Lagos studio, from where we are joined by Dr. Laz Ude, who is a public health practitioner. Dr. Ude, we're very glad you could join us on the program.
Thank you. Good to be here with you.
And from Jos, we travel to, I beg your pardon, from Lagos, we travel to Jos. And in Jos, of course, we are joined by the Dean, Faculty of Natural Sciences at the University of Jos, Professor Georgina Wansat. We're glad you could join us, Prof.
In Nigeria, and greetings from Plateau.
We have the complement of our guests for the discussion this morning. Let's begin with the National Coordinator of the Malaria Elimination Program in Nigeria. That's Dr. Audu Bala Mohammed, who we just introduced a moment ago. Dr. Mohammed, where does Nigeria stand in 2017 with regard to control and elimination of malaria?
Well, as you quite know, because of the nature of the country, our climatic condition is within the sub-Saharan Africa, and it's a very conducive environment for the breeding of mosquito, and also the country is one of the most populous countries in the sub-Saharan Africa. So for that, we accounted for almost about 25% of the malaria burden in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, Nigeria and Democratic Republic of Congo are the key countries involved. But for that, the global community, including the government of Nigeria and even the private sector, have now put that challenge to see how the burden of malaria can be addressed. And as you quite know, malaria affects both the most vulnerable group, children under 5 and pregnant women. And when you go to our health facility, you find that the outpatient visit, about 60% of the outpatient visit is due to fever. And most of these fevers is due to malaria, and also the mortality. With all these things, then there is a lot of concerted effort to get more investment into malaria, and also to sensitize the people, because malaria is both preventable and can be treated. And as such, we have come up with so many line of intervention, both in prevention.
Dr. Bala, before we go into the lines of intervention, we'd like to really expatiate more on malaria. Distinction has been made between simple malaria and other types of malaria, and some have gone to say that, look, people really, the deaths, the statistics we're having is not necessarily from what is described as simple malaria. Could you break down this for us?
Well, in the malaria we have uncomplicated malaria and we have severe malaria. When you don't treat the uncomplicated malaria, then you now move to the severe malaria, and it's more common in children under 5. Because if you delay treating them within the next 24 to 48 hours, they can now reach into the severe malaria. And the severe malaria is the one that is more devastating and can be fatal. So this is how it is.
At what temperature level, does malaria become severe? If you can give us an insight.
Well, actually, the normal body temperature is about 37 degrees centigrade. But if you have fever due to malaria, it can shoot to up to over 40. So with that type of situation, so many dynamics and the physiological changes can happen to the body, and it can be very fatal to the person.
Well, so the question I posed, actually, Dr. Aldo Mohammed, is where do we stand, in 2017? Last year, you had this World Malaria Day. This year, we are also having it. Is it a mere ritual? Are we tracking? Are we keeping track of our malaria burden? And if so, how well are we doing in seeking to reduce the burden?
Yeah, well, we are doing very well, actually. And though we have some yardstick that we use to achieve impact. And so the current statistics we have on ground that is very, very reliable is that in 2010, we did the malaria indicator survey, and the prevalence was 42%. But by 2015, when we did the sense survey, it has dropped to 27%. So with that, it means we are making a lot of progress. So all we need to do is now to scale up all the interventions we are doing, and this is where the program and the global community are putting all efforts to see that, wow, so in Nigeria, within a five-year period, this drop can happen. So we are putting in more effort to see that we meet up to our new strategic plan 2014-2020, whereby by the year 2020 we will reach to the pre-elimination level of malaria.
All right, let's pause it for a while and get to Lagos, where Dr. Laz Ude, a public health practitioner, is joining us. Dr. Ude, you listened to Dr. Bala here, who is the National Coordinator, National Malaria Elimination Program. He says we are making, significant progress with regards to, either prevention or treatment. But from your perspective, 92%, over 90% of Nigerians or of the population is said to be at risk. Is that progress made?
That's progress. I agree with Dr. Mohammed, Dr. Audu, that we've made progress in the fight against malaria, especially over the last decade. 97% of Nigerians are at risk. He's mentioned the population of the country, and also the geography of the country also plays a role. Mosquito that carries a malaria parasite, the female Anopheles mosquito in these parts of the world, tend to live longer. They have a longer lifespan. The weather of our country is also contributory. So, but the good news about malaria is that it's largely preventable. We know the cause, we know the parasites, we can stop the parasite, and there are various ways we could go about doing that. So with the collective efforts of governments and development partners, we've been able to reduce the prevalence from 42% in 2010 to 27% in 2015. So, but we will be able to reach the pre-elimination stage of having it at 5% by 2020 as the National Malaria Strategic Plan 2014 to 2020 seeks to achieve. We are in 2017 and we need to do more to get to that level, and also to ensure that no Nigerian child is killed by malaria. We want to have zero death by 2020 from malaria-related causes.
So I would like you to elaborate more on what you just said. Everybody says in terms of strategy, we know what causes malaria, we know how it is, how it can be prevented, and how to go about it. But if you look around, the evidence, just mere physical evidence, would tend to suggest otherwise. Are we just talking about paper on strategy and so on and so forth, without looking essentially at our daily lives and seeing the evidence around us that tends to encourage the breeding of mosquitoes and therefore higher rate of infection of malaria?
For us as Nigerians, the fight against malaria, the efforts to eliminate malaria in this country, is everyone's responsibility. Of course, government is largely responsible for coordinating efforts and educating the people. Are we doing enough? I don't think we are doing enough, because we can actually have lower than 27%. So, but who is responsible? We have to take it at, is everyone doing what they are supposed to do? As individuals, we have to ensure that we keep our environments clean. It's rainy season, it's just starting in many parts of the country. What of the drainages, are they kept clean? How are we throwing around plastics and other things that collect water for mosquitoes to grow? We don't have to assume that everybody knows this. There are supposed to be health educators in every local government in this country. So how many local governments do we have functional health educators? In the different rainy seasons, there's supposed to be active education of the people on practices that is going to make the environment better. And the local government system is supposed to be largely responsible for that. So we are not seeing much of it. We don't have to assume that everybody should know this. We have to educate people about it, and we have to enforce it, because malaria costs so much money to government, it costs to individual pockets, because out-of-pocket health expenditure in this country is up to 70%. It has a lot of implications that the various authorities need to do more. Private sector is coming up, and there is this campaign that they are saying malaria to zero, and they are making certain contributions, but they can as well do more. We have to use every institution, religious houses, traditional rulers, everybody to educate the people. But more so, government at the state level in particular should also have good budget, because what we've observed over the years in recent past is that the malaria control effort is largely donor dependent. Yes, the hospitals are there, the government built the hospitals, the government paid the health workers, but the money for the program is largely being provided by development partners. Global Fund and a couple of others that are supporting the country are supporting 24 states. There are 12 states with minimal or no support. And in those 12 states, from the various reviews that have been done, you see that there is no line item, and even when there is budget for malaria, it's not released. So as a country, we need to make this decision that this is a problem we need to solve, and every individual have to see it as personal responsibility. The use of insecticide-treated nets by National Malaria Indicator Survey 2015 utilization is about 36%, while the ownership is 86%, which means if you take 100 persons, 86 of them have insecticide-treated nets, but only 36 sleep inside them. But we know that based on the temperature of this country, it may not be possible for everybody to sleep inside the net, because during the hot weather, sleeping inside the net can actually make it hotter. But the other prevention measures, like indoor residual spray, which by NMIS data is only 1% of households have been sprayed. And like Dr. Audu mentioned, we have a target of up to 30% being sprayed. So these are a holistic way of going about this, and all hands really have to be on deck.
So we will look at the intervention strategies. But Professor Georgina Wansat, you've listened to the contribution so far. But let me again draw your attention to the statistics contained in the National Malaria Strategic Plan 2014-2019. And it reveals that malaria is responsible for 60% of outpatients to health facilities, 30% of childhood deaths, 25% of deaths in children under 1 year, and 11% of maternal deaths. Now, do you think this is a reflection of the efforts to roll back malaria? And are we getting our, strategy focus right?
First and foremost, I would like to align myself with Audu of the National Malaria Elimination Program, that cases of malaria, whether morbidity or mortality, have greatly reduced. This, I affirm, we have done some researches on the plateau and other states in North Central to agree that populations of the malaria mosquito have reduced over the years. So from the data we have now and the data we had before, looking at it from the mosquito aspect or the vector aspect, if the vector has reduced, it means by logic that the disease should also reduce, and that is what we are getting from the field. The statistics that we have are the noun statistics. When you compare them to statistics that we have years ago, we are making progress. In fact, tremendous progress. Our population is large. We are very many in Nigeria. And controlling malaria means controlling the vector, bringing the vector to a minimal population. And the vector will not stay in jaws and remain in jaws. It's a fly, it flies. So for what we are doing, I think we are making progress, but we can make better progress. If we will use all the intervention strategies that we have, especially prevention, we will get there. We know that we have 80-something% LLIN that we have distributed free of charge to members of the public in Nigeria. But we also know, from what our colleague in Lagos is saying, that it's just 36% of us that use them. We need to encourage ourselves to use our nets and to use other kind of screens that will reduce the vector-human contact. And these figures will be better years to come.
Professor Wansat, thank you very much. Just to indicate, of course, that you know that in various homes now you are having increased use of insect screens, and some, of course, some persons also use insecticide. But you were talking earlier about the reduction in the vector population. In other words, the population of the female Anopheles mosquito that carries the plasmodium that causes malaria. From your research, what has been the most effective means of decimating the population of the Anopheles female mosquito?
From what we have in our research, the long-lasting insecticidal net that is impregnated with insecticide that kills the mosquito when the mosquito lands on it is a prevention tool. And the indoor residual spraying, that is spraying an insecticide that kills the mosquito on our walls, and it stays there for between 4 to 7, 8 months. These are the two prevention strategies that I think have reduced the population of mosquitoes in Nigeria and in other places.
All right, thank you very much there, Professor Wansat. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Just to indicate that we are being joined now by another guest with us here in the Abuja studios. He's Dr. Rex Mbazanje. He's the acting WHO country representative. WHO, of course, stands for the World Health Organization. Dr. Mbazanje, a pleasure to have you join us on the program.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's immediately bring you into the conversation. The WHO, of course, keeps track of malaria burden worldwide. What is it you can say about the malaria burden in Nigeria in terms of efforts aimed at control and elimination?
So malaria in Nigeria and the burden of it remains, especially if we look at the African region, malaria in Nigeria is the highest burden in the African region, and in the world is among the top 10 high burden countries. So malaria remains endemic throughout almost all states in Nigeria. And as such, in terms of the look by WHO, is really the focus on trying to deal with all the intervention areas. In other words, Nigeria falls within the category of countries that are in pre-elimination. countries, whereby the main focus is that of controlling the disease. There are other countries in the region which are in the elimination phase, where the focus is to try, I think, the other strategies of trying to get rid of whether mosquitoes or indeed getting rid of the parasite itself. But for Nigeria, Nigeria has not yet reached in that category. So the main focus from the global perspective is to control the disease, which means, I think, as discussed earlier, issues of accessing treatment, issues of nets, issues of making sure that there is some indoor residual spray, especially in targeted areas. So these are the sort of interventions that the World Health Organization promotes for countries like Nigeria, which are in the elimination phase.
But we do understand that the WHO is also asking for deployment of new tools, and I'm wondering what kind of tools does the WHO, intend?
So WHO is recently, I think a week ago, this week, I should say, for example, launched the malaria vaccine for 3 countries. This is one kind of the new tools that WHO is working with globally. And also within the realm of research, there are quite a number of areas that WHO is working on, both within the area of vaccines as well as the area of new drugs. So WHO is working with the various partners to look at tools in all these areas that can help to strengthen the fight against malaria.
Tell us something more about the malaria vaccines. What time frame are we looking at if the trials are successful before we have an application to the general population?
The time frame is about 2 years, about 1.5 to 2 years for the first 3 trials that were launched earlier. And these will now provide the sort of guidance in terms of the circumstances within which the vaccines that are being tried will best be used. As I think we may have heard, the vaccine, the efficacy is in the region of 40 to 50%, and therefore needs to be applied quite carefully within the settings. And this was one of the reasons why they did take into factors countries sort of applied to participate in the trial, to select the sort of countries that they are going to do the phase 3 trial. But hopefully within 1.5 years to 2 years, we will have the vaccine now ready to be deployed wider than the 3 countries.
3 countries are said to have been selected, of course, African countries, Ghana, Malawi, and if I'm right, Kenya?
Yes.
Kenya. Now, what are the parameters for selection?
They did a call for proposal. WHO did a call for proposal asking countries to apply, and WHO did look for very specific parameters. One of them included immunization coverage. Another one looked at the malaria intervention themselves and their coverage. But it also looked at the sort of, especially the areas that the trial will take place in terms of the program strength and other parameters. So these were the factors that were looked at, and the 3 countries, I think, did better in these areas to be able to be selected to become the trial countries.
You talked earlier about the 2 stages in dealing with malaria. The first is control, and then the other is elimination. Apparently, elimination is higher than control. Now, in terms of where we are, that's to say Nigeria, we are at the control stage. From your findings, how well are we doing with regard to controlling malaria, the vectors, and even the disease itself?
Nigeria is actually doing very well. I think, as seen from the data, I think the minister recently, even as of yesterday, pointed at the reduction of malaria prevalence in Nigeria, as shown by the survey that was done, the last one being 2015, which really showed almost a halving of the prevalence of malaria. So Nigeria is on the right path in terms of controlling malaria. But I think, as other speakers have indicated, there are still quite a number of areas that we are looking forward to continued improvement. And majority of these areas is the availability of the services and also the commodities that are required for malaria. So this, I think, the national program managers, this is really the preoccupation of every day, to just try to make sure that the services and indeed the commodities that are required with them are available throughout the country, so that anybody who has sort of fever is able to be diagnosed, and malaria is able to be identified in majority of the people and then treated appropriately. Beyond that, I think also it's the population themselves, because I think yesterday the minister did emphasize, for example, for the population to just make sure that whenever they go to the clinic, that one, they are not treated before diagnosis. In other words, the diagnosis exists, so they should always ask. If a doctor says, swallow these drugs, you have malaria, they should say, did you take my sample and diagnose that I have malaria? So I think that is also empowering the population. Secondly, is that even when they are given the drugs, they should really know that the drugs that are supposed to be used now is artemisinin combination therapy, and they shouldn't get monotherapy. So if they are ending up with monotherapy, they should ask, why am I being given monotherapy? And thirdly, is also that chloroquine is no longer treatment for malaria. So if they end up being given chloroquine, they should ask, but I was told that chloroquine is not treatment for malaria. So I think the main message is that we need to empower the population as well. They need to demand the rightful service for malaria. And then on the supply side, yes, I think the national government and the malaria national coordinator need to make sure that the services and the commodities are available. And that's really the mainstay of the sort of activities or the response in Nigeria in the control stage. If that continues, the prevalence will continue to drop. So that's really the mainstay of what we need to be doing throughout.
All right, let's get back to Lagos, to where Dr. Lance. Dr. Lance, you've listened to the WHO rep here in the studio. Now, at the rural level, that's probably where you have more of the, statistics of those who, have come down with malaria and probably the deaths resulting from it. Now, most of them patronize, patent medicine vendors who probably do not also have the skill to, make diagnoses, but do go ahead to prefer treatment. So how do we ensure that the patent medicine vendors, have this skill, so that we begin to make proper diagnosis at that level?
You are very correct. At the rural level, we have most of the burden and most of the death related to malaria. And in the past few years, there have been efforts to train some patent medicine dealers at the rural level to be able to diagnose before they treat. Unlike before that, the diagnosis is only taking blood samples and looking at the microscope, which those are the patent medicine dealers, popularly called chemists, may not be able to do. Right now, we have the rapid diagnostic test kits that you could just take just small sample of blood, and within 10 to 15 minutes, you can get your result before you treat. So we need to ensure that the patent medicine dealers at the rural, especially hard to reach communities, are trained on how to use this and also made available to them. And various states, because we also have malaria elimination programs at the state level, need to ensure that this happens. And also the primary health care centers, is very good that the current administration has prioritized strengthening primary health care centers. So Nigerians, especially those at the rural level, should be able to walk up to the health posts, the health clinics, the health centers with history of fever and get tested and treatment commenced within 24 hours. So, and people need to know this, and that's why I kind of emphasize education. The acting WHO country rep also talked about it, the people knowing what to expect. The culture has been someone has fever, walk straight to a chemist store or to a health center and demand for drugs. We need to educate them that not all cases of fever is malaria. There could be other causes of fever, especially for children under 5 years. Most of the deaths occur when people go into self-medication, when there is a history of fever and they start taking paracetamol or other medications to treat themselves, that communication, behavioral change communication needs to happen, and there need to be deliberate efforts to make sure that people get to know about it and they change their health-seeking behavior as is related to fever, because malaria is one of the most misdiagnosed health conditions in this country, and that behavior needs to change, particularly at the rural level. Another way is also educating girls, educating women. The NMIS survey of 2015 also showed that most of the deaths from malaria occurs among children whose mothers had no education as compared to mothers that are educated. So the education of women is also one of the ways that will ensure that malaria is controlled. But like I said earlier, at the rural level, everybody, not just training the patent medicine dealers, because for some of them, they might not, because of time, want to do the right thing. Supervision of practitioners also have to be prioritized, because when we train people, sometimes we expect that everybody does the right thing, but we know that it's not everybody that will do the right thing. So there need to be supervision at that lower level. I emphasize that level because a lot of times at the local level, we think that Abuja or the National Malaria Program or partners should do everything. We need to take responsibility. The World Development Committees, the community village development associations need to be sensitized to have this knowledge and ensure that the people do the right thing in terms of practices.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lazude, for the points you just articulated. But just to bring in again Dr. Audu Muhammad into the conversation, the point that Dr. Ode was talking about with regard to self-medication and so on and so forth, we still have a challenge, particularly in urban areas as well, amongst the low-income groups. You have persons who would rather just walk to a patent medicine store, to buy whatever drugs they feel are adequate for them, or alternatively, they resort to traditional medication, that the so-called agbo or dogoyaro. How much of an impact is this in the efforts at controlling malaria?
Well, we are putting so much strategies and guidelines, and also some training methods to reach out to the populace in a very simple language on what one should do to make sure that he gets the right management of malaria. The issue is that people always feel that if they have fever, they quickly rush and take anti-malaria. This is not supposed to be so, because not all fevers are malaria. So the population should always make sure that when they have malaria, they should go to the appropriate health facilities, and then they should demand a test before any treatment. And then also, as has been mentioned by Dr. Ude, we have deployed the cheap anti-malaria medicine with the green logo to all the chemists in the country at a very subsidized rate. But having the subsidized drug is not enough. We have also made the RDT available, and if they also demand for the RDT, I'm sure they will get the diagnosis and find out it is malaria. If it is malaria, they get the artemisinin. But if it is not malaria, then they look for some other alternative way. And then also, I will also encourage the patent medicine vendors and even the role model caregivers we have trained in the community to also refer cases that they think is not malaria. And then also, people should know that, as was mentioned by earlier speakers, the malaria is caused by the bites of the female Anopheles mosquito, which carries the parasite Plasmodium falciparum. And as such, they need to make all concerted effort to make sure that their fever is diagnosed.
All right, Dr. Mohammed, thank you. Let me again bring in, just before we go to Jos, where Prof is sitting, Professor Jadina, we'll soon get to you presently. But Dr. Rex, you earlier on amplified, the fact that people or patients should not ask for chloroquine or should not take chloroquine, as a treatment for malaria, and even fancied. I hear, but most patients will tell you, look, if I take chloroquine, I get better. So what is it about chloroquine, that has made it, a no-no for malaria treatment?
Chloroquine for Nigeria, I think the last survey that was done on efficacy of drugs, I think was about 2010. And the efficacy of chloroquine in Nigeria was in the region of about 40%, which means if people take chloroquine, only 40% of those who have taken it with genuine malaria will really be treated. So it's not that it completely doesn't work. It works for a few, fewer than 50% of the people. But the majority of the people, it will not work because the parasite has become resistant to the drug. And the change of drugs, if you remember, we changed it from chloroquine to Fancida, as you indicate, then now to artemisinin, is that the rationale is always that these drugs we change from will be useful in the future. That's always the rationale when we change from one sort of drugs to the next. But in order to make sure that these drugs become useful in the future, we really need to make sure that they are not being used at all for the treatment of malaria. Because as long as the parasites keep on being exposed to this drug, they will keep the sort of mutation that they have that has made them resistant. They'll keep it. But if the drug is withdrawn from the population of the parasites, then the mutation that they have will eventually disappear, and you can easily be able to introduce this drug. So the reason why we are asking people not to take chloroquine is not only because it doesn't work in majority of people, but also because chloroquine will likely be useful in the future as a treatment of malaria once the parasite loses the mutation it has against chloroquine.
And then the other issue with the chloroquine is that chloroquine has an analgesic effect. So if you have fever that is not malaria or is malaria, when you take chloroquine, you get some temporary relief. And then if you don't know that the chloroquine is not working, you get some relief, you think you are okay, after some 2-3 days, your fever comes back again. So we are discouraging people not to think that chloroquine, because of the temporary relief they are getting, it means a drug that they should continue to use. And as the country rep of the Blue R has said, that now we have this ACT and it's subsidized and also it's free in the public health facilities. So why should people go to something that may not work? And the malaria is a very fatal disease. So if you leave a child after 24 to 48 hours, you end up having severe malaria. And once a child has severe malaria, to reverse it is very fatal and the child would die. So I will encourage people not to risk their life by saying that, okay, let me try the 40%, maybe I may be the lucky person among them. They should go for the ACT. The ACT, for all the studies we have done, even the current one, the 2010 and 2015, is showing the malaria clearance of 98%. So with that 98%, it means if you are taking the correct ACT, the one with logo, the one that has the mask code you scratch, you will now text it and then compound that is the genuine one. You will get cleared and you will be treated. But we also have some instances once in a while, some drugs are fake, substandard, etc. So people should insist on the quality assured ACT.
All right, Dr. Aldo Bala Mohammed, thank you. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and just before we go on break, I'd just like to ask you, the viewer, of course, to weigh in on our Twitter handle at NTHGMN to make your contributions. You can also tell us how much artemisinin costs in your locality. Dr. Mohammed here has said it has been subsidized and it's even free of charge in public facilities. We'll take a short break now. The program will continue presently.
You know, after 4 years of marriage, he still treats me like we're married today. You're so lucky. I am.
I wish I were you.
God, why? Why me?
I wish I was in your shoes. Let us swap positions. We all say these words, but wait a moment. Look beneath the surface. All that glitters may not be gold. The style of Joe may not look good on Peter.
All these boys wearing body hug up and down, making guy left, right, and center. Are they better than me?
You always look mature in your agbada. So what is this you're wearing today?
Your rib-cracking comedy, Professor John Bull, tackles another social issue in Copy. Those who wish to be like others.
Look at me going to a supermarket with common 100 naira bread when my mates are buying things worth 35,000 naira.
No two fingers are equal. Every family must live within their means.
Showing at 8:30 p.m. every Tuesday and Friday on NTA Network International and Star Times.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow.
Welcome to the new speed of life.
Chewing gum neutralizes bad odor. It doesn't just disguise them, it gives you real minty breath.
Admission forms for the 2017-2018 academic session of NTA Television College JAWS into its diploma programs are now on sale. The diploma programs are in film and TV production, broadcast journalism, and TV engineering technology. Applicants are required to have at least 5 credits, including English language and mathematics at SSC, NECO, or GCO levels in not more than 1 sitting. Application forms can be obtained from the TV College Refi JAWS or at any NTA zonal centers nationwide on payment of a non-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA Television College. Completed application forms should be returned to the office of the academic secretary, NTA Television College, or the Center of Purchase on or before 28th of July 2017. For further inquiries, please call 0806 980 9807 or 0703 660 7155. NTA Television College, training you to be the best you can be.
All right, you're welcome back, but if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We are reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As my colleague Claire indicated before we went on that short break, we have tweets already coming in from our viewers. The Twitter handle is there on the left side of your screen. Check it out at the bottom at NTA GMA. We'll take some of those tweets right away. Suleiman Babagana tweets, is it true that malaria cannot be completely treated but reduced to a certain level in the human body?
All right, and Engineer Abdullahi tweets, control of malaria is the responsibility of the government and the people. Both have roles in the required environmental sanitation.
And Jacob Lloyd has this tweet. I want to ask, has government stopped distributing long-lasting insecticide mosquito nets? Because I haven't seen any person distributing it recently.
And James Oluwatosin tweets, preventing malaria should be a priority for government, but increasing the price of drugs by the same government is a sabotage in the fight.
And then we have this again from Festus Akimboye, where it says that, I think we'll skip that in the meantime. Suleiman Babangana, rather. It says, Dr. Bala, this question is directed to you. It said, what is your take on the erosion of fake malaria treatment drugs in chemists, as some are not certified by regulators? So, Dr. Bala, that's the question for you with regard to the prevalence of fake malaria treatment drugs. But just before we bring in Dr. Bala to answer that question, we have some other tweets that have come in in the meantime, and then we'll take those tweets right away, Claire. Yes.
All right, and this one is coming from Festus Akimboyewa, and he tweets, it's sad that many malaria sufferers in Nigeria will rather depend on herbal leaves than our very weak health system. Time to act.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about, Agbo and Dogoyaro a moment ago. Now, Sani Michael, or they call it root, you see they said those things around motor parks. Now, Sani Michael Omakoji says, elimination of malaria in Nigeria is attainable, but the question is there the political will to actualize it?
All right, and there's one coming in from James Oluwatosin. He says, and the rate at which people use these nets, that's talking about the insecticide-treated bed nets in the farm, is worrisome because it wasn't meant for that purpose. This is very interesting.
That's right. And Oluwatosin adds again that I discovered that the mosquito nets made available to curb the disease are no longer as effective as they used to be. And then we have this one from Law Alpha C. It says, malaria is a great killer in this climate. Western international health organizations know this fact, but Africans take it for granted.
All right, and finally, Sani Michael Omakuji. He says malaria can only be eliminated if government can treat malaria patients free, which can encourage people to go to hospital and get medicine free. And many malaria sufferers in Nigeria resort to self-medication because of lack of confidence in our national health system. This must change.
All right, so there are some specific questions that we'd like our guests to respond to. One is clinical. Let me just repeat the question from Babagana. It says, is it true that malaria cannot be completely treated but reduced to a certain level in the human body? Let's begin with Dr. Bala Mohammed.
Well, from all indication, with all the intervention put out through the WHO, you find that now we have about 10 additional countries that have eradicated malaria. So which means if other countries were able to institute all this intervention, malaria will be eradicated. And this is the target of the international community, to make sure that nobody, no child or nobody dies from malaria by the year 2030.
Well, sorry, the question relates, you're talking about eradication, which is elimination. Second step, as the acting WHO rep said earlier, this is about treatment. To say that, look, if no matter what you take, you still have a residue of the parasites in your system. Is that correct?
No, it's not true. If you take the right drug, it will clear the whole parasite from your system. It's only that maybe there will be reinfection later on. So if you are well treated and then you follow all the preventive methods, you will not get malaria again in your system.
All right.
Stay with Bala.
That's right.
Talking about the availability of the mosquito-treated bed nets and why are they used on the farms?
Okay, I think in that tweeting also somebody talks about the issue of the net distribution. You see, currently we are going to distribute nets to additional 6 states, about 13 million. But we do the replacement campaign every 3 years. So if a state net distribution is conducted, it will take another 3 years before. But then we also give routine net distribution, the antenatal clinic, for the pregnant women and the newborn. So it's a continuous process, and then people can also access these nets at subsidized rate at the pharmacies. It costs about 100 naira. This is also subsidized both by our partners and government. So nets are always available, but the practice of people using the nets for fishing and so on, these are bad practices which are making a lot of effort to de-emphasize that. And in fact, there are some state governments that have made it a rule that if you are caught using the nets in fishing, you'll be prosecuted. And I think people should know that these nets, it costs the government and the international community a lot of money. For each net that comes into this country, it costs about $5. And if you are giving this net free, you find that you are doing this humanity to, you are doing a disservice to humanity by using it for fishing, which it will turn up, it will not last long, and it may even have some maybe consequences into the environment.
I was wondering, Dr. Bala, I'm clear, this is a bit curious. This mosquito nets are also imported into Nigeria or something? And we can't produce them here? Is that the suggestion?
Well, producing mosquito, it involves so many things. You need to have the industries, the equipments, etc. But the Honorable Minister has posed a challenge to our investors and our manufacturers. And yesterday we were able to launch the first produced mosquito net in Nigeria. It's produced in Aba, and very soon they are putting all the processes in place to have a massive production. By so doing, the government will do all enabling environment in such a way that if it is issue of cost that is preventing people from having mosquito will now be very cheap and very available. It will also empower our youth to get jobs doing. It will also improve the community where that factory is. and we will have good control on how to assess, because sometimes we make orders and the orders don't come in good time. But if it is locally produced, definitely it's just a matter of 3 days. The truck will just move the net from Aba to Maiduguri, for instance.
Yeah, yes, in fact, it does. It should attract an applause, for that. But someone just, observed that some of these nets are also used in fishing, and it's wondering if, the chemicals used in treating the nets are not poisonous.
Well, they are not poisonous actually, because if it is poisonous, then we will not even use it to sleep and diet. The danger is that it's a wastage actually. It's just a wastage.
All right. Well, let's hope we're not returning to what used to happen in the 60s and 70s, where people were using gamalid, to kill fish in the streams, and then, of course, get to sell them. Now, let's bring it again, Dr. Rex Pazanje. Some countries have already, as you indicated, eliminated malaria, as it were. They've gone to that second phase. What do we know about their experience in achieving this feat? How did they go about it? So that as we're on the learning curve, we can begin to say, look, that's our projection. These are the things that we must do in order to get there.
Thank you very much. I think, as Dr. Bara indicated, there are indeed quite increasing number of countries that are going to what we call pre-elimination phase, even within the African region. And if we look at exactly what they did, is more or less what we have indicated. It's just to achieve high coverage of all the key interventions, whether it's the net coverage. They have achieved a very high coverage of mosquito nets, both in terms of distribution, ownership, as we mentioned, but also use. So this is one intervention that surely, if we are able to sort of increase the use of treated mosquito nets, we will be able to prevent quite a lot of malaria cases. The second is really looking at all the treatment interventions. They have also achieved a very high coverage of treatment. Because if you look at malaria, if, in other words, all the population, let's assume you have one part of the country whereby everybody with malaria in that month gets treated. And then after that, they go and sleep under the net, which means, because malaria has a life cycle. And within that period of life cycle, which means everybody who had malaria has it eliminated in their body, those malaria which still keep the parasite within the cycle, the 14 days, are not able to transmit it to those who are susceptible because they are sleeping under the net. You can clearly understand how quickly it can be eliminated. But it requires really a population level sort of intervention whereby everybody seeks treatment as quickly as possible and gets it. And also at the end of the day, they sleep under a net to make sure that the parasite is not transmitted. And you reduce the prevalence of malaria even within the mosquitoes in a very short period of time. And this has been what has happened in most of those countries which have reached the pre-elimination stage. So it is an act that as we increase the utilization of RRINs and also increase the coverage of treatment, it is very likely that even countries like Nigeria will go in that same direction.
All right, let's go to Jos. Professor Georgina Nwansata, we appreciate your patience. We've kept you for a while. Now, moving forward, what should our strategy focus on now that we are still within the control stage?
Thank you. If we are going to be very successful, more successful than we are now, we must begin to look at what we call insecticide resistance. This is the ability of the mosquito to circumvent the effect of the insecticide, whether on the LIN or used as indoor residual spraying tool. We have noticed over the years of our research that most mosquitoes don't die on time at the level of the chemical that they should die. Because of exposure, they have developed resistance to the insecticide. More so that the mosquito that perch on a net that is supposed to die after a while don't. They have undergone some kind of mutation that keeps them alive and increases the human vector contact over time. I think in the future, this is where we should be looking at. And I'm glad to say that along with the National Malaria Elimination Program, whose national coordinator you have with you there in Abuja, we've done some work in the whole country, in the 6 geopolitical zones. We've been able to know the level of susceptibility or resistance of the mosquitoes. And we are trying to go into how can we mitigate against this, like, you know, changing the class of chemical or insecticide that you use over time or in different areas, trying to rotate them like we have in crop rotation, so that we will not have a situation in the future where all classes of WHO approved insecticide for either AIN and indoor residual spraying become useless. I mean, if the mosquito does not die when you spray or when it perches on the AIN, it's no longer useful. So this is the area I think we should be looking at, and we are already on it. The major problem that this kind of forward-looking might have is that of available and continued financing. Dr. Audu said that we are collaborating with partners. And these partners, I must say here that they are trying. I think there needs to be a better synergy between the development partners and our own government, maybe putting some more money in the budget of the Federal Ministry of Health so that research can go on and findings of research can be brought to the table for implementation. Thank you.
All right, Professor Wansat, thank you very much. We hope we have the opportunity of coming back to you to get your closing thoughts before we wrap it up on the discussion segment of the program. But just to return to the Abuja studios, Dr. Rex in Pazanje, that's an issue that we also would need to touch here. I mean, there's some connection between warm temperatures and the breeding of mosquitoes as we have in the tropics, particularly in Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, worldwide, there's the issue of global warming. Has the WHO also factored this in as to whether or not it might impede, you know, the efforts aimed at eliminating malaria, whether controlling the first instance and moving on to elimination? What is the nexus between global warming and then the efforts to tackle malaria?
Yes, indeed. I think within the malaria control sphere, global warming has been looked at as one of the factors that may have a bearing towards the path of eliminating malaria, both in terms of the spread of mosquitoes, because as the world warms up, including areas where mosquitoes used not to be, mosquitoes are going to be there, and also the spread of the parasite itself. But global warming in itself has not halted the sort of efforts towards elimination. What it has helped is to sharpen the strategies that will need to be done within the context of the warming globe to still achieve malaria elimination. So the strategies that have been developed both at the global level and the national level that Dr. Barra referred to for 2030 do take into account the issues of global warming. Specifically, I think as we look at is that quite a lot of the strategies focus on elimination of malaria itself rather than elimination of the mosquito. So it is possible, because you look at the countries which are even in elimination phase, it's not that they don't have mosquitoes that bite them, but the mosquitoes don't carry the malaria parasite. So it is possible, quite a number of countries, even in Southern Africa and others, have mosquitoes, but increasingly the mosquitoes are not carrying the parasite. So it is possible within the realm of elimination of malaria to eliminate the parasite itself, even when mosquitoes still remain. But yes, you still need also to control the mosquitoes that carry the parasite. So the fronts of trying to deal with the strategies towards the elimination of malaria are looking at both and taking into context the warming sphere to make sure that we still remain on track.
Just before we get back to Dr. Lasude for his final comment, I'd like to ask Dr. Mohammed now, talking about elimination and addressing, the parasite, mosquito parasite. Some time ago in River State, a factory, was, launched as the larvicide factory. Do we have an update about that factory today?
Yes. That factory is the larvicide to produce the biolabile drugs that will be used to, the mosquitoes, the breeder of mosquito is inside water and it lays the larva inside water. So there is some biolabicide that if you now put into those body waters, it will kill the larva. And this is there is some collaboration between the ECOWAS countries and the Cuban government and to establish this factory in Nigeria and Ghana. And the process is ongoing, because putting in a factory takes a long period of time.
The one in River State precisely, because it was a big ceremony then, some years back.
Yes. So, there is some issues that is beyond the program actually, but they are still on track on how to put it in place.
All right. Well, Dr. Bala, thank you very much. Let's return to Dr. Ode. Dr. Ode, I would like you to speak very briefly, to the issue of interagency cooperation in the control and elimination of malaria. I mean, we keep talking about drugs. Earlier, you spoke extensively about self-medication and why that should be eliminated, and what the patient's rights should be, in the presence of his physician. But it's still very possible for Nigerians to walk straight to a pharmacy, ask for any malaria drug, and get it, whether it is fake or otherwise. We do not appear to hear a lot about NAFDAC in this respect. What are your thoughts? What should NAFDAC be doing in collaboration with the elimination program?
Thank you, Clem. NAFDAC has a lot of role to play in ensuring that the drugs are original, the drugs are good, and interagency cooperation is very much required between National Malaria Program, NAFDAC, and also not just those parastatals under the Federal Ministry of Health. We've talked a lot about environment. So the Ministry of Environment also needs to be involved. I think we need a holistic national strategy, because to me, malaria is not just a health issue, it's an economic issue, and it's also an environment issue. I would strongly recommend that if we could have a team that involves key personnel in the agencies, even including Federal Ministry of Works and the state levels as well, because sometimes roads are constructed in a manner that water is collected, the drainage system is not done in a way that water will flow, and water cannot flow up. So those things are important. The interagency collaboration is very much required between all relevant agencies, but there needs to be a coordination platform for that to happen. Without such coordination, not just on program implementation, but also monitoring and evaluation, supportive supervision, and every other thing that is required, both at the national and at the state level, we might still observe some gaps. But for states, as stated earlier by Prof, there's needs for political will to be demonstrated, and there cannot be demonstration of political will without funding. What is obtainable in Lagos State might not be what is obtainable in Sokoto or in Rivers State as it regards. So we may not have one strategy fits all. That's where it comes to state level. They can also support research at the state level. We don't have to wait for every 5 years for national malaria indicator survey to be conducted before we have certain data to know what's happening. So at subnational levels, we can promote that interagency, interdepartmental, interministerial synergy and collaboration, and also strengthen all the institutional frameworks, both at the government, at the community level, to ensure that we get the desired results.
Dr. Laz Ude, I'm compelled to appreciate you at this point because we've run out of time. We'd like to appreciate your contributions, and you've joined us from our Lagos Network Center. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Right, let me quickly also thank Professor Georgina Wansat, who is the Dean, Faculty of Natural Sciences. She joined us from the University of Jos. Professor Wansat, many thanks to you.
Thank you for having me.
And Dr. Mohammed, a very brief response. $300 million malaria bond. Recently, the Senate President stressed the need for us to access that fund. What is happening to it?
Well, actually, we just received an advice from the Federal Minister of Finance that that Eurobond, for some reason, could not be accessed. But they have also given us some additional opening, for which we are now putting for the necessary submission to access it. We require this bond because, you know, the domestic financing would require, we really require domestic financing to address some aspects of the malaria intervention. And as the WR has mentioned, that to achieve pre-elimination, you need to have enough of these commodities. So as the CBN governor has done, we also wanted to have another source of funding whereby we'll be pushing all these commodities like the anti-malaria enough into the country in such a way that even if you keep this
Mohammed, thank you. I have to interject here. Thank you very much. Dr. Aldu Bala Mohammed, National Coordinator, National Malaria Elimination Program. Many thanks to you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And of course, Dr. Reze Mpazanje, Acting WHO Country Representative. Many thanks to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. And
all right. So let's move on now to our complimentary segments, and we join Musbah Udan Wahab for sports.
Hello then, welcome to Sports. Action continues as the second stanza of the Nigeria Professional Football League (NPFL) resumes today across the country. Plateau United will have a relative easy ride to maintain top spot as they welcome Remo Stars, who are only second to the last in the relegation waters. MFM and El Kanemi Warriors are second and third respectively on 33 points each, and with same goal difference. Champions Enugu Rangers are the base of the log, though with 3 games in hand. Barcelona today will begin to consolidate their top spot on the La Liga table as they face Osasuna at the Camp Nou. Barcelona toppled Real Madrid with a 2-3 win at the Estadio Santiago Bernabeu,